Hello, students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today, we are going to continue our American government history series by looking at the legislative branch. Don't forget that there's a link for a fill-in-the-blank worksheet in the description. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize for any mispronunciations ahead of time. I do my best. Okay, let's go. The framers set up Congress to be the ultimate lawmaking body, but with enough checks and balances to keep it from getting too power-hungry. Members of Congress juggle 5 main gigs: legislating, representing, committee work, being political servants, and of course, politicking. When it comes to voting on bills, they switch between being delegates, following the folks back home, trustees, voting on their own wisdom, partisans, sticking with the party line, or politicos, doing a bit of everything. These days, the rise of polls and the internet has made most of them more delegate-minded. Congress spends most of its time in committee meetings deciding which bills get to see the light of day. They also keep an eye on the executive branch, making sure it's playing by Congress's rules. And when constituents have a government issue, Congress members turn into troubleshooters. Although Congress has become more diverse, it's still mostly run by white, upper-middle-class men with a solid resume in politics. Each term of Congress lasts 2 years, starting every January 3rd of odd-numbered years. They meet almost year-round, with some breaks, but if things get dicey, the president can call them into a special session, though that hasn't happened in over 50 years. Congress members get paid, enjoy some perks like free mail, franking privilege, and technically set their own salaries. But if they get too greedy, voters have no problem reminding them who's really in charge at the ballot box. The U.S. Congress is bicameral, which is a fancy way to say it has 2 houses, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. The House of Representatives is like a massive game of musical chairs with 435 seats, divvied up based on state populations. Every 10 years, the census tells us how many chairs each state gets, which might mean some states get to squeeze in more while others lose a spot. But don't worry, each state gets at least 1 chair. States then redraw their district lines, hopefully not in sneaky ways, aka gerrymandering, so voters can pick their House reps. Elections happen every 2 years, and if you're an incumbent already sitting in one of those chairs, you've got a 90% chance of keeping it. The Senate, on the other hand, is like the VIP lounge of Congress, only 100 seats, 2 per state, and senators serve 6-year terms. Every 2 years, a third of the Senate gets a chance to renew their VIP status, so the Senate never fully turns over. Senators are like the elder statesmen of Congress, wielding more power and prestige, and generally staying above the day-to-day drama, or at least trying to. To get into the Senate, you've got to be 30, have 9 years of U.S. Ford citizenship under your belt, and meet a few unofficial qualifications like being famous enough to get people's votes. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress a whole toolbox of powers, some of which are clearly listed, expressed powers, some are hinted at but not spelled out, implied powers, and others they just get because they're Congress, inherent powers. They regulate trade, but no funny business like taxing exports or playing favorites with states. Congress is also the government's money manager, collecting taxes, borrowing funds, and printing legal tender, although they've become pros at borrowing more than they earn, racking up a hefty national debt. Congress is also the branch that is supposed to have the war powers, but LBJ de facto snagged that to the executive branch at the start of the Vietnam War. We've been in a bunch of wars since, but the last war that Congress declared was the Second World War. Congress also has the power to impeach and remove federal officials, even the president. Impeachment does not necessarily mean removal, though. The House of Reps investigates, and if warranted, draws up articles of impeachment with only a simple majority being needed. All this really means is that the official is accused and charged, not that the official is guilty. They are like the grand jury, if you will. The next step, the trial, happens in the Senate. This is the innocent or guilty phase, with the sentence for guilty being removal from office. For this, 2/3 of the senators have to vote guilty. If it is a regular old public official, the vice president is in charge because the VP is the president of the Senate. If it is the president that is on trial, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court runs the show. As far as presidents go, there have been 4 impeachments in U.S. history: Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump twice. None have been removed. Congress even dabbles in intellectual property law, giving authors copyrights and inventors patents so they can cash in on their genius. They oversee the postal system, deal with federal land, and make laws for places like Puerto Rico. They can take your land for public use through eminent domain and decide how much stuff should weigh, because someone has to. Plus, they get to say who gets to be a U.S. citizen. In the legal realm, Congress sets up courts below the Supreme Court and writes the rules for federal crimes and punishments. When it comes to foreign policy, they're the real power players, controlling war, military funding, and other international dealings. Though the president gets to send troops out for a little combat now and then. Congress gets a lot of its powers from the Constitution's Necessary and Proper Clause, also known as the Elastic Clause, because it stretches like yoga pants after Thanksgiving dinner. This clause has allowed Congress to expand its powers in ways the Founding Fathers never imagined. The big debate over implied powers started in the 1790s, with Thomas Jefferson's strict constructionists wanting to keep things tight, and Alexander Hamilton's liberal constructionists wanting to flex those powers as much as possible. Spoiler alert, Hamilton's team won, and now Congress has powers that would blow the framers' powdered wigs off. Congress uses its stretchy powers to regulate pretty much anything under the sun, from commerce to war. They can't just pass laws for the general welfare without a solid reason, but they can tax and spend money like it's going out of style. They even shell out billions for things like education, which isn't mentioned in the Constitution at all. Lastly, Congress can propose constitutional amendments and help pick the president and vice president if no one wins the electoral vote, giving them a pretty full plate of powers to juggle. Now let's put Congress to work. When Congress kicks off a new term, it's like the first day of school for the House of Representatives. New kids, members, show up. They pick their class president, Speaker of the House, and set the rules for recess, committees. Meanwhile, the Senate just rolls in like, we've been here, no need to rearrange the desks. Then, the president swings by to give the State of the Union, which is basically the nation's annual report card. The Speaker of the House is like the head teacher, controlling the classroom, house, assigning homework, bills to committees, and even has a shot at being principal, president, one day. Over in the Senate, the vice president is more like a substitute teacher. Shows up occasionally, doesn't really TEC, but gets to break ties if things get messy. If the vice president is out, the president pro tempore steps in, kind of like the teacher's aide. On both sides, the real power players are the floor leaders. Think of them as the team captains, making sure their squad, party, scores the goals, laws. And they've got whips, who are basically their hype people, making sure everyone's in line. Then there are the committee chairs, who are like department heads, running their specialized subjects and grading the work, bills. They're usually the teachers who've been around the longest. Seniority rules. Congress also has some serious group projects going on, with committees like the House Rules Committee, which decides how and when the big debates go down. Most of the work gets done in standing committees, which are permanent. But just like school, there are special groups for certain projects, select committees, teams that work together, joint committees, and even a conflict resolution committee, conference committees, for when the House and Senate can't agree on the final draft of a bill. If you remember our separation of powers, it's the legislative branch's power to make laws, and Congress is like a giant idea factory cranking out bills and resolutions by the thousands. A bill is a proposed law, and it's like the star of the show. But it's got backup dancers like joint resolutions, which are just like bills, but focus on special or temporary stuff, and concurrent resolutions, which are like teamwork makes the dream work. Agreements between the House and Senate, but without any legal punch. There are also simple resolutions, which are basically the House or Senate talking to themselves about rules and procedures, like changing their lunch menu. Now, sometimes sneaky little extras called riders try to hitch a ride on these bills. They're like those friends who tag along even though nobody invited them, hoping to slip by unnoticed. They often get attached to bills that are bound to pass, kind of like a piggyback ride to victory. When a bill is introduced, it gets read, like story time, and the speaker sends it to a committee. But here's the thing. Most bills are doomed to get pigeonholed, which means they're stuffed into a drawer somewhere, never to be seen again. Occasionally, a brave soul uses a discharge petition to rescue a bill from committee limbo. If a bill escapes committee, it's scheduled for debate. The House Rules Committee plays referee, deciding whether the bill gets to see the light of day. If it does, the House debates it, sometimes as the Committee of the Whole, which sounds like a superhero team but is just the House with less strict rules. If the bill passes, it gets printed in final form, Congress's version of getting its diploma, and then it's off to the Senate. In the Senate, things are a bit looser. Debate can go on forever unless everyone agrees to stop, and if a senator decides to pull a filibuster, they can keep talking until everyone else falls asleep or calls for cloture, which is the Senate's way of saying, enough already. To get cloture, 60 senators have to vote for it. It's called a supermajority, and it's hard to come by with how polarized our government is right now. And to be clear, a bill can start in either the House or the Senate, unless it has to do with taxes. Revenue bills have to pass the House first. After both the House and Senate pass the same version of a bill, which sometimes involves a conference committee working out the kinks, it's sent to the president. The president can sign it into law, veto it like a boss, or just let it sit there for 10 days and become law anyway. If Congress adjourns during those 10 days and the president doesn't sign it, the bill gets a pocket veto, which is like ghosting the bill. It's gone, no questions asked. Okay, to recap. Congress is like a chaotic variety show where lawmakers juggle bills, resolutions, and the occasional political stunt. The House is constantly rearranging seats, with 435 members playing musical chairs every 2 years, while the Senate enjoys VIP status with its 6-year terms and only 100 seats. Senators act like the cool older siblings, trying to stay out of the drama, while the House is more like a rowdy classroom. Bills can either become stars or get lost in committee limbo, and if they're lucky enough to survive, they head to the president's desk for either a signature, a veto, or the silent treatment. Congress also has a bunch of powers that stretch as far as a pair of yoga pants, thanks to the elastic clause. Meanwhile, committees are the real workhorses, and filibusters in the Senate can turn into epic talkathons that leave everyone exhausted. The cherry on top? Congress can even impeach presidents, though that doesn't always mean they'll get kicked out. There you have it, folks. That is the legislative branch nutshelled. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. I vote for you to like and subscribe. What law would you want to push through Congress? Let us know in the comments down below. See y'all next time on Nutshelled History.